Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Today I want to talk about the new Halloween movie released last weekend. There will be no spoilers from the new movie in this video, beyond things that were revealed in the trailer, but there will, however, be spoilers from the original Halloween and its direct sequels. For the purposes of this video, we're ignoring the Rob Zombie installations, because I'd prefer to believe they never existed, but there will be various spoilers from the original 8 Halloween movies. So viewers, if you haven't seen all of those, please be warned. Let me start by saying I really enjoyed the new Halloween movie. It was definitely a fun and worthwhile experience. Jamie Lee Curtis still kicks a lot of ass. And while it may not have been the greatest sequel in the franchise, it certainly wasn't the worst sequel either. So how did this sequel compare to the previous sequels?
What about the boogeyman?
There's no such thing.
Richie said he was coming after me tonight.
Do you believe everything Richie tells you?
He's been here once tonight. I think he'll come back.
Tommy, please! Tommy, hurry up! Tommy, please!
Get upstairs.
What is it?
All right, upstairs, get Lindsay, lock the bedroom door. Do as I say!
The boogeyman is-
Hurry! What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Most observers would probably tend to agree that the original Halloween film from 1978 was the best of them all. Not only did the original Halloween set the tone for the future of the franchise, but it also largely helped define the future of the entire slasher subgenre. Halloween was the movie that ignited the explosion of awesome slasher films to follow during the 1980s. Halloween had a simple yet compelling story, a tremendous haunting soundtrack, and some really great scares along the way. But what really made this one the standout classic that it is today were the stellar performances from Donald Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis in their respective roles of Dr. Loomis and Laurie Strode. That duo was simply terrific. So it's not really fair to compare the new movie to the original, and on a similar note, I'm also excluding Halloween 3 from consideration. I love Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Sure, it doesn't have Michael Myers in it, so I kind of think of that as being a separate entity altogether from the rest of the films. But let the record show that I believe Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, and Dan O'Herlihy, they were all excellent. I thought the story from Part 3 was really cool and compelling, and the Silver Shamrock theme song is undoubtedly one of the most memorable jingles in the rich history of horror.
8 more days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. 8 more days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
What's that?
Who cares?
About the confusion over your order, I just tell you one thing. A replacement order is being prepared for you absolutely free.
Stop it now. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it. Stop it.
The whole thing's on me.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
So when we look at the other 6 sequels, parts 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, how does the new Halloween stack up? Here is how I would rank those 6 films.
I'll see you in hell.
For my tastes, Halloween Resurrection, the 8th installment from 2002, I think this was the worst sequel of the bunch. And the main reason I feel that way was because of that opening scene. Killing off Laurie Strode in the opening scene, that's something that always struck me as a poor creative choice. And it made everything else that happened after that seem rather anticlimactic. It was all downhill after the opening scene, and while some elements of this movie may have been slightly ahead of its time, I don't think it stacks up against the quality of the previous 7 films. The shame in all of this was that they had a pretty clever way of bringing Michael back in this one, but killing Laurie Strode in the opening scene? That's just insulting and unforgivable.
You should know that it's not wise to play Halloween pranks on me. I suppose it was a ghost that did all this, huh? It was a ghost talking on the radio last night, and that's a ghost being carried out here right now.
Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. That was the 6th installment released in 1995. And I definitely enjoyed this one, but this whole story was a mess. Basically, it all boiled down to trying to explain the origins and power of Michael Myers. But that's just one of those mysteries that needs no explanation. In fact, it's the lack of an explanation that really helps make that mystery work well in the first place. This was the last time fans would get to see Donald Pleasence in the role of Dr. Loomis. Pleasence passed away after filming before the movie was released. And Loomis is undoubtedly the best aspect of this movie. So that alone makes this a must-watch for any fan of the franchise, but this was definitely one of the worst sequels.
You think if you kill them all, it will go away? It won't. Michael, go home. Go home!
Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. This was the 5th installment released in 1989. To be honest, this is another sequel that had its fair share of problems. I thought Part 4 created a lot of new momentum going in, and all of that was lost here, where they seemed to abruptly take things in a totally different direction. The whole psychic connection thing going on between Jamie and her Uncle Michael, that all seemed a little out of place and unnecessary. There were also some really bad comic relief moments, and quite a few unlikable characters, but all the same, this sequel had its fair share of charm and fun. Donald Pleasence was firing on all cylinders as Dr. Loomis, there were some pretty cool kills, and the final stretch of the movie created a lot of chilling tension and suspense. So while Halloween 5 certainly had its fair share of shortcomings, it also still managed to do a lot of things very well.
My brother killed my sister when she was 17.
How'd he do that?
With a really big, sharp kitchen knife. Get in there, barricade the door, lock it. Do as I say now! Go!
Halloween H2O 20 years later. That was the 7th installment released in 1998, marking the 20-year anniversary of the original movie. This was Jamie Lee Curtis's first appearance in a Halloween movie since Halloween 2 17 years earlier, and she was nothing short of extraordinary in reprising the role of Laurie Strode. In fact, I think the entire cast was pretty solid in this one, and LL Cool J was particularly good in his part. There was a high level of intensity throughout much of this movie, and H2O embraced the ideals of the original in the sense that it was a simple story that continued the tale of our beloved Laurie Strode, who faked her own death and went into hiding from her brother Michael. H2O had a lot of thrills, a lot of good scares, and a compelling story about a beloved character. The ending was absolutely terrific, and everything building up to that moment worked and was exceptionally well executed. An excellent effort from the great Steve Miner who directed.
You're talking about him as if he were a human being. That part of him died years ago. Michael? God damn you.
Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. This was the fourth installment released in 1988. Horror fans were finally treated to the long-awaited return of Michael Myers. And amazingly, we also got to see the triumphant return of Dr. Loomis. Apparently, old Loomis is just as tricky to kill as Myers himself, and this dynamic duo dominated the bulk of the screen time. But we also had the addition of the Jamie Lloyd character, where we got a really great performance from Danielle Harris. And all in all, Halloween 4 was a good story with interesting characters, some great kills, and in the end, this amounted to a very enjoyable, suspense-filled continuation of the saga of Michael Myers. The only thing missing from this movie was Jamie Lee Curtis, and the absence of Laurie Strode inherently had its downside. But all the same, this movie did an amazing job reviving the franchise by bringing Michael Myers back to the big screen.
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart.
Can't have gotten very far. Come on.
I shot him 6 times.
Couldn't have shot him 6 times.
You think I'm lying, Sheriff?
I think you missed him. No man could take 6 slugs.
I've told you this isn't a man. An hour ago, I stood up and fired 6 shots into him. He just got up and walked away. I shot him in the heart.
Can't have gotten very far. Come on.
I shot him 6 times. I am talking about the real possibility that he is still out there. What does you fellas usually do? Fire a warning shot, right? Help me! Get away from him! But he stopped breathing. No!
Michael, stop!
Halloween 2 was the first sequel released way back in 1981. And to this day, it undoubtedly remains the best sequel in the franchise for me, bar none. It was a nearly flawless continuation of the original movie. And while Halloween 1978 is obviously the gold standard among Halloween films, Part 2 actually tends to be more enjoyable for me. Dr. Loomis and Laurie Strode are kicking all types of ass in this movie, as is Michael Myers in his brutal path of destruction. This was the only Halloween sequel that starred both Donald Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis. And for that reason alone, that inherently gives this sequel a huge advantage over any and all sequels that followed. The hospital scenes produced some incredible tension, and the entire final chase sequence in this movie is something that's really both special and chilling. Halloween 2 also had what was arguably the greatest ending in the history of slasher films. And all in all, Halloween 2 was an absolute powerhouse. And frankly, I could listen to Dr. Loomis screaming this all day.
I shot him in the heart.
Can't have gotten very far. Come on.
I shot him 6 times.
So if we ignore the Rob Zombie films, and we exclude the original 1978 Halloween, and also Part 3, Season of the Witch, my ranking of the sequels looks like this. So where does the new Halloween 2018 fit into these rankings? Well, it's absolutely positively better than Parts 6 and 8. That much I know. I think almost any fan of the series would probably agree that those two are the worst of the bunch, if we're not including the zombie films. But at the same time, I don't think the new Halloween film is as good as any of those on the top row. Part 2, Part 4, and H2O. Those were all undoubtedly better sequels in my mind. So that leaves Halloween 2018 and Halloween 5 on similar ground. Without getting into the specifics of certain elements I disliked about the new Halloween, long story short, Halloween 5 was still a product of the 1980s. And that in itself gives it the edge for me. Halloween 5 still had a glimmer of that 1980s slasher film magic, and it also had a very fired up Dr. Loomis. So this would be my final ranking, and where I feel the new Halloween movie figures into the mix. At the end of the day, if you're a horror fan, and you particularly like 80s slasher films, then you should definitely watch this movie for those of you who have not already done so. Especially if you're a fan of the Halloween movies. While Halloween 2018 wasn't my favorite sequel of the bunch, I want to reiterate the fact that I thought the movie was very enjoyable, Jamie Lee Curtis rocked, and I would highly recommend it. So what did you think of my sequel rankings? And where would you rank Halloween 2018 among the previous sequels? Please let me know and share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, have a wonderful night, and have a happy Halloween.
Tommy, please! Tommy, hurry up! Tommy, please!
Michael, go home. Go home!
Get upstairs. What is it? Go right upstairs, get Lindsay, lock the bedroom door. Do as I say!
The boogeyman is-
Hurry!
It's time, Michael.
I shot him in the heart.
Can't have gotten very far. Come on.
I shot him 6 times. An hour ago, I stood up and fired 6 shots into him. He just got up and walked away. I shot him 6 times.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!